My dad bought me a board game that tried to tickle me to death. I haven't laughed in 3 years, not a real one anyway. I can do the fake kind, the little huff of air you give a coworker when they make a bad joke. But a real, gut-deep, can't-breathe kind of laugh. That's gone. It was stolen from me on my 18th birthday, and I live in mortal terror of what might happen if I ever feel it coming back. It started with a gift. My dad, Raffi, was a collector of oddities. He loved scouring flea markets and obscure online auctions for things with a story. That night, my girlfriend Zoya was over, and we were all in the living room, a half-eaten cake sitting on the coffee table. "All right, Kian, one more," my dad said, his eyes twinkling as he slid a flat, heavy box wrapped in brown paper across the floor. It was long and rectangular, maybe the size of a chessboard. "Dad, you didn't have to," I said, but I was already tearing at the paper. It wasn't a board game, not really. The box was made of a dark, almost black wood, intricately carved with figures that seemed to writhe and grimace. There was no brand name, no text at all on the outside. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled in faded red velvet, was a single playing piece. It was an effigy, carved from what looked like polished obsidian, of a man bent backward in a state of ecstatic laughter. His mouth was a gaping hole, his eyes squeezed shut in manic glee. Beside him lay 2 dice, carved from yellowed bone. The only instructions were etched into the inside of the lid in a precise, spidery script. The gilded jester requires an audience of 1. 1. Cast the bones to gauge his mirth. Dumber. 2. Place the jester at the foot of your bed. There, in darkness, ask for his performance thrice. Let the joyless hear my call. Let the silent breath befall. Let the laughter take its all. "What is it?" Zoya asked, leaning over my shoulder. My dad shrugged. Seller called it a 19th century solitude game. Found it on an estate auction site. Figured it was weird enough for you. It was weird, all right. It felt less like a game and more like a prop from a horror movie. But I was 18, and the world still felt like a place you could poke with a stick, without consequence. Later that night, after Zoya had gone home and my parents were asleep, I took the box into my room. The house was silent, wrapped in that deep suburban stillness, where the only sound is the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the grimacing little statue. "Solitude game," I muttered. It sounded like a fancy name for playing with yourself. On a whim, I decided to try it. I mean, why not? I shook the bone dice in my hand. They felt unnervingly light, and they didn't rattle like plastic. They made a dry, clicking sound, like insects skittering across the floor. I tossed them onto my rug. A 6 and a 5. 11. High mirth, I guess. I placed the obsidian jester at the foot of my bed, its silent, screaming face pointed toward my pillow. Then I killed the lights. My room plunged into a familiar, comfortable dark, the only light a sliver of moon through the blinds. Holding my breath, feeling like an absolute idiot, I recited the words. "Let the joyless hear my call. Let the silent breath befall. Let the laughter take its all." I said it again. And a third time. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge downstairs. A car passed on the street outside, its headlights briefly sweeping across my ceiling. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, a little chuckle escaping my lips. I felt foolish, but also a little relieved. I kicked off my jeans, slid under the covers, and was out in minutes. The first thing I felt was a draft, a cold spot near my feet, as if someone had left a window open. I pulled the comforter tighter around me and drifted back toward sleep. Then came the scratching. A faint, dry sound, like a fingernail being dragged slowly across the floorboards. It was so quiet I thought I was dreaming it. I listened, my heart starting to thump a little harder. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. It was coming from the foot of my bed. My eyes snapped open. The room was darker than it should have been. The moonlight from the blinds was gone, as if something was standing in front of the window. I lay perfectly still, every muscle in my body screaming at me not to move, not to make a sound. And then I felt it, a touch, on the sole of my foot. It was impossibly cold, and the pressure was light, like a spiderweb brushing against my skin. I flinched, pulling my foot back. A few seconds of ringing silence passed. I told myself it was the sheets. It was just the sheets bunching up. It happened again. This time, it wasn't a brush. It was a deliberate, spidery tracing. Long, impossibly thin fingers dancing over my arch. The touch was wrong. It was dry and brittle, and a deep, penetrating cold seeped into my skin. I tried to scream, but the air caught in my throat. My body was paralyzed with a kind of fear I'd only ever read about. I could only watch as a shape began to resolve itself in the darkness at the end of my bed. It was tall and painfully thin, a silhouette of stretched limbs and sharp angles. It had no discernible features, just a deeper black against the black, a void in the shape of a man. As it leaned over me, 2 tiny pinpricks of red light ignited where its eyes should have been. It didn't speak. It didn't have to. Its fingers, all 10 of them, suddenly descended on my feet. It wasn't tickling. You have to understand that. To call it that is an insult to the horror. It was a systematic assault on my nerves, a precise, cold, and rapid series of touches that bypassed any feeling of playfulness and went straight to a place of pure biological panic. A laugh burst out of my chest. It was a horrible alien sound. It wasn't mine. It was a strangled, high-pitched bark of air. My body convulsed, my back arching off the bed. The thing's fingers skittered and danced, and the awful, involuntary laughter kept pouring out of me. I was screaming and laughing at the same time, tears streaming down my face, my lungs burning for air I couldn't get. It felt like I was drowning. The door to my room flew open, and the hall light flooded in. Keon, what the hell is going on? It was my dad. And in the instant the light hit, the thing was gone, vanished. The pressure on my feet disappeared. The cold in the room dissipated. There was nothing there. I was left gasping on my bed, a sobbing, hyperventilating mess. Raffi rushed to my side, his face a mask of confusion and concern. What was that? Were you having a nightmare? He asked, his hand on my heaving shoulder. No, I choked out, pointing a trembling finger at the foot of the bed. It was here. A man, a shadow. It was touching me. My dad's eyes scanned the empty room. He looked at the floor, the closet, the window. He saw nothing. He saw his son, wild-eyed and hysterical. You had a night terror, kid, he said, his voice soft but firm with certainty. A bad one. It happens. It wasn't a dream, Dad. I was awake, I saw it. I pleaded. My voice sounded insane, even to my own ears. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was on something, or just cracking up. He gave me a glass of water, told me to try and get some sleep, and left, leaving the door cracked open. The unspoken message was clear. I'll be listening. I was more terrified now than when the creature was in the room. I was alone with this. No one would believe me. There was no way I was staying in that room. I grabbed my pillow and the comforter and went downstairs to the living room couch. I turned on every lamp I could find, bathing the room in a warm, yellow glow. I curled up on the couch, facing the hallway, and watched the darkness, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For an hour, nothing happened. The house was quiet again. The terror began to subside, replaced by a dull, throbbing exhaustion. My eyelids grew heavy. Maybe my dad was right. Maybe it was just a dream, a vivid, horrifying, but ultimately harmless dream. That's when I heard it. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. From the top of the stairs. My blood ran cold. It wasn't in my head. I stared into the dark maw of the hallway leading to the staircase, every nerve ending on fire. A shadow detached itself from the others. It didn't run or creep. It unfolded itself into the hall light. A stick figure of a man made of pure darkness, its movements jerky and unnatural. The 2 red embers of its eyes fixed on me. It was here, and it knew I was awake. I scrambled off the couch, a raw scream tearing from my throat. DAD. The thing moved. It flowed down the hallway towards me, silent as death. I backed away, stumbling over the coffee table, sending the cake plate crashing to the floor. Kian. My dad's voice boomed from upstairs, followed by the thunder of his footsteps. But the creature was too fast. It cornered me against the far wall, its frigid presence washing over me. Its long, spindly hand shot out and clamped onto my ribs. The laughter started again, violent and immediate. My body was seized by convulsions, my head slamming back against the drywall. I was suffocating on my own forced hysterics as the thing held me in place, its grip like iron. My dad appeared at the end of the hall, his face pale with sleep-muddled confusion that instantly curdled into sheer, unadulterated shock. He saw it. He saw the impossible shadow pinning his son to the wall. "Get away from him," he roared, a primal sound of fury. He charged. He's a big man, my dad, built solid. He threw himself at the creature, but his hands passed right through its torso as if it were smoke. The thing didn't even flinch. It simply turned its head, the red eyes locking onto my father. With its other hand, it reached out and laid its fingers on his chest. My dad's roar of rage died in his throat, replaced by a sudden, choked gasp. Then a chuckle. It was a weak sound at first, but it grew, swelling into a full-blown, helpless roar of laughter that mirrored my own. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his sides, his legs kicking feebly as the entity held him in its grip. He was drowning, just like me. Seeing my father, my strong, invincible dad, reduced to a weeping, laughing heap on the floor, broke something inside me. Through the haze of my own agony, a single thought cut through the panic. The jester. The game. The box. I screamed, the words tearing through the cacophony of our shared torment. The man. In the box. My dad's eyes, streaming with tears, met mine. For a second, a flicker of understanding crossed his face. With a surge of adrenaline I didn't know he possessed, he shoved himself away from the thing, scrambling on all fours back toward the stairs. The creature let him go, its attention now fully on me, its chilling work intensifying. My vision began to swim in black spots. I could hear my dad crashing around in my bedroom upstairs, a desperate, frantic noise, a drawer being ripped out, a lamp falling over, and then a sharp crystalline crack. The sound sliced through the room. The entity holding me recoiled as if it had been struck by lightning. A noise tore from it, not a laugh, but a high-pitched shriek like metal grinding on metal. The pressure on my ribs vanished. The forced laughter died in my throat, leaving only ragged, painful sobs. The shadow figure convulsed, its form flickering and distorting like a bad TV signal. It thrashed in the middle of our living room, its silent scream echoing in my mind. Then, with a final, implosive rush of cold air, it dissolved into nothing but a pile of fine gray dust on the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. My dad stumbled back into the living room, his face as white as a sheet. In his hand, he held the two jagged halves of the obsidian jester. We never spoke of it again. Not really. The next morning, we cleaned up the dust and the broken cake plate. We threw the pieces of the shattered effigy and the wooden box into a dumpster a town over. We patched the hole in the drywall where my head had hit it, and we went on with our lives. But something is broken inside me. The mechanism that produces joy is jammed. Sometimes, if a friend tells a really good joke, or I watch a funny movie, I'll feel a ghost of it, a phantom rumble deep in my chest. And in that moment, the joy turns to ice. And in that moment, the joy turns to ice. I feel a chill creep up my spine, the phantom sensation of cold, dry fingers on my skin, and I remember the sound of my own voice, laughing and screaming as I begged for it all to stop.